If we go back in Star Citizen's history, there is a very important moment in their history, and it's called the Road to Release, which probably wasn't the best name for it, but this is 2018 CitizenCon, where, and I said this in my video last week, which a lot of people took problem with. This was their, I think, first CitizenCon where they really started to get it, that they needed to actually give us a game plan that made sense long term, that wasn't just, we're building stuff and it's looking fun and we're having a good time, sandworm. Like, this was a realistic long-term roadmap to an extent of where the game was supposed to go. And that first goal that they set out was server meshing. They had a couple of other things on there. Org tools was on there. It's a big one. But persistence was also there. Object container streaming was there. Buying and renting ships was there. 64-bit precision was there as something they had already gotten. And for some reason, my webpage is not loading. There we go. So let's listen to what he was saying back then as their long-term goal, because I think this leads us into this talk about Star Citizen 1.0.
But this is an online live game, and so for us, we don't have a particular viewpoint in terms of, oh, that's it, this is where we finish it, and we don't do any more work. It's like literally, we kind of view, as long as you guys want to live in this universe, every 3 months, we're giving you a build, and here you are, and here's a bit more, and here's a bit more, and here's a bit more. And when we get to the full persistence and server meshing, I think at that point, that's when we're not going to be resetting the servers. It's when it will be an ongoing, living, breathing game. And that, I'm not going to give you a date, but
that was on my bingo card. Where is my bingo card? I don't even know. That was on my bingo card, him saying no dates, but he didn't actually do it this time. This sounds eerily similar to what he was saying yesterday, and we'll go back to that too.
But you can watch
6 years ago, yeah,
as we develop it, and just watch for that, because us internally, those are what we view as our sort of cornerstones that we need to get to. And yes, there's a lot of other things that we've talked about that we're also working on, but when we get that, we feel like it will be a game like no other. So that is kind of what we, in terms of road to release. But speaking of near-term release, little premature there, I think, Chris, in terms of like that. He called it road to release, and I feel like this was when he should have called it road to release, because that was road to, we're going to build a game now. We're done building the game engine. And I think that's the biggest change that we're seeing with 4.0. It's like 3.0 was them acknowledging that the persistent universe needed a direction. 4.0 feels like them acknowledging that it actually has to be a game and not just like a tech demo that we're playing to test these features. Things we're doing in.
So listen to how similar that is to what he was saying yesterday.
The past X number of years. And now we thought, you know what we should do, because I think half our sort of initial stuff is from a long time ago that you've seen, and then occasionally we'll talk about things we're doing in, inside Star Citizens or SE Lives, but we're like, okay, let's tell everyone the marker. This is what it is, Star Citizen 1.0. When we hit this is what we consider we're ready to go wide. Everybody in the world can get in, play it, whether you're hardcore or casual, have fun, play in the verse, interact, have a great time. And so,
see, like, it's largely similar.
A bit more, and here's a bit more, and here's a bit more. And when we get to the full persistence and server meshing, I think at that point, that's when we're not going to be resetting the servers. It's when it will be an ongoing, living, breathing game. And that, I'm not going to give you a date, but
he didn't say that yesterday.
But you can watch on our roadmap as we develop it, and just watch for that, because us internally.
It's actually really funny that he said that exact phrase. You can watch on our roadmap, because then they had that whole thing about roadmap watchers. Like, I think it was 2 years after this when they kind of scaled back the roadmap.
those are what we view as our sort of cornerstones that we need to get to. And yes, there's a lot of other things that we've talked about that we're also working on. But when we get that, we feel like it will be a game like no other. So
okay, so going to yesterday.
That is what we're going to tell you today is what we consider Star Citizen 1.0. That doesn't mean, as I said, that we'll stop at that point. We'll continue to grow and build and add things. So
I swear to God, that's almost word for word what he said before.
Shit, and we don't do any more work. It's like literally we kind of view, as long as you guys want to live in this universe, every 3 months we're giving you a build, and here you are, and here's a bit more, and here's a bit more, and here's a bit more. And when we get to the full persistence and server meshing, I think at that point, that's when we're not going to be resetting the servers. It's when it will be an ongoing, living, breathing game. Fishing is not on Star Citizen 1.0's list, but I'm pretty...
It did get a lot bigger, you're right about that.
I know, but I'm pretty sure it will be not that long after 1.0. But that is the example. We're going to tell you what the marker is, and to do that, Rich Tyra, who's our senior game director, is going to come out with a few of our
I think one of the biggest
and
changes we've seen in Star Citizen over the years is that Rich Tyra is now giving a lot of this messaging. Chris is stepping off the stage, which did not happen before 2022. And Rich is now coming on to talk about, here's what I want to do to release something that you guys can actually play. And we saw that really start a lot in 2022. And it's continued since then.
Now, I've been at Cloud Imperium for many years, and I've read many, many Spectrum and Reddit posts. And one consistent question, what type of game is Star Citizen? And I've read many, many answers. It's a PVE game. It's a PvP game. What about non-combat? Ultimately, it's all three. 3 types of players, 1 universe. So how do we connect those players to create a cohesive game and not just a set of features bolted together?
Yeah. Dude, he said that earlier this year, but that's so on the point.
It comes back to that elegant, simple question. What type of game is Star Citizen? Well, today, we're going to find out. Okay, so before we get stuck into Star Citizen 1.0, I think I need to clarify a few things. Firstly, what about 4.0? Where does that fit in? Well, 4.0 is the patch that contains server meshing and pyro. And fundamentally, it's an alpha development patch, which means it's adding further tech, features...
This is the current CitizenCon.
Alpha version of the game. Today, though, is beyond 4.0, all the way to 1.0. And the big difference is that 1.0 is the full release of the game. Okay, so what does that mean? How will it be different to a normal patch? Well, firstly, let's look at the 1. The 1 means we're committing to higher base performance and minimal bugs.
Only 1 crash per session.
No longer will we reference that the game is in development. This will be a fully released and polished experience. It means fully rounded gameplay loops, from new player experience to story missions and endgame content. And crucially, it means no more resets between patches. It's a true...
Which is like, wow, yeah. That's why I feel like, once again, Chris misspoke back here during the road to release, because he was like, yeah, once we hit persistence and server meshing, we're going to stop the wipes and stuff. And it's like, well, no. Then you're going to do some stuff so you can stop the wipes. Don't get ahead of yourself. But that's why Rich Tyra is giving this presentation and not Chris. Love Chris, but he goes a little off script, I think.
It's a true persistent universe. So if that's the 1, what about the .0?
No glitches.
Well, it's
Zero
just
glitches.
as important. It means we're still committed to continued development, with new content and features being planned post 1.0. But those features will no longer be tier 0. We'll be committing to a higher benchmark of quality for each patch, and most importantly, it's a moment in time. If there is a content, feature or star system that we've mentioned in the past that is not in 1.0. It just means it will come later.
That, as much as that is quality marketing speak, I think the safest way to go about this is to like not think about anything past 1.0. There's obviously going to be more stuff after 1.0. Our own org headquarters is in Magnus, which is not going to be in 1.0. But like the best way to enjoy Star Citizen is to just expect what they've stated. And all they're stating here is the 1.0. So as much as he says that, I would still just, you know, keep that in mind. It helps a lot with not getting disappointed later.
1.0 is more than just a number change. It's the beginning of a new phase of development of the game. Okay, so we know what the 1 is and the .0, but before we move on, I want to address one important point. And for this, we need to go all the way back to the beginning. Here we are, the Kickstarter. As a backer myself,
the
it brings back
Kickstarter.
memories.
Thanks for the sub, Darth Chris.
And it also reminds me we had a lot of stretch goals. And one of those goals was 100 star systems.
Oh my God, I was so relieved when he started talking about this. I'm so sick of answering that we are not going to have 100 star systems. Even like he's talking about 1.0. I don't give a about 1.0, okay? 100 star systems is such an unrealistic goal for the way they're doing star systems now. They changed the way they're doing it. When we started this game in 2012, this was going to be Star Wars Outlaws in the way that you would land. You'd pick a spot. Dude, we have the video for it actually right here. Star Citizen, CitizenCon 2015, I think it was. Like we have a video that shows what it was going to be like back then. It was not going to be a good time. I mean, it was going to be a good time, but it was going to be not what we have now. Look at this. Check this out.
Entry, descent, and landing procedure initiated. Assuming navigational control.
This is it. You press a button. It cuts to a split screen. It shows you flying into the planet. Ah, there's something in my glass. It's so fast. And then suddenly, boom, there's a city in front of you. And you're suddenly flying through the clouds.
Descent vector preparation.
This is almost exactly what Star Wars Outlaws does. And it's not a bad thing. I'm not trying to hate on any other games and the way they do this. This is something you have to do for a certain type of game. But it was entirely different than what we're doing now. You could fly this entire course yourself now.
Please stand by for arrival at Commercial District C, Area 18, ArcCorp.
None of this is player controlled. This is all still cutscene. So like a different kind of game, to be sure. And it's not about whether or not this is right or wrong. When they acquired all of the Crytek devs and they got their, for those who don't know, around this same time, Crytek was having a lot of problems. They couldn't pay a lot of their employees. So a lot of those employees straight up went to CIG. Sean Tracy is one of them. Those are people who literally were building the CryEngine and they weren't getting paid. And Chris Roberts was using CryEngine, really liked the stuff, and they said, hey, you know what? You can come over and work for us, and you can get paid. This is why they ended up building their own engine on top of CryEngine. And at that same time, those people were working on procedural Planet Tech. During that whole phase, they got the Planet Tech to work in between this CitizenCon and the next CitizenCon, and they said, hey, let's transform Star Citizen into something that uses procedural planets. Now, obviously, we have the demo that we saw on the first day of CitizenCon, but like that changed the entire scope of what the game was going to be. Biggest feature creep you've ever seen. But honestly, thank God, because I think it's much better for us to be able to freely move around planets. I think that's really opened the game up. It's led to a lot of other features that has extended the development time, and all of that's another conversation. But it was a good change for the game. And clearly, when that change happened, there was not the same plans to deliver the same amount of planets, because 100 planets where you just get led on rails to a city is different from 100 planets where you can land anywhere. So I'm glad that he's finally addressed this, but Jesus, I don't know why it took so long. Do I have any concerns with how large space stations and XL building elements are?
But, and there is a but,
a couple. We'll get to that, though.
Star systems of old are not the star systems of today. They were based on the privateer and freelancer model. They were unexplorable planets with an isolated and small landing zone and had automated landings. And we all know how that went. To give you an idea,
is that shade,
Stanton
Rich?
had 4 points of interest, and the entire 100 systems only had 90 POIs. Compare that to Stanton today, and we have 1,626 points of interest. And that is going to be dwarfed once we start using the Starchitect tool you saw yesterday.
Starchitect. Freaking stars. I'm never going to look at the word star again.
So where does that leave us for 1.0? Well,
hey, Clinton, thank you for the sub, mate.
With 100 star systems.
32 months,
because the game we have today was not just the game that was pitched back then. It's more rich, it's more diverse, and fundamentally, you'll be getting a whole lot more, and I mean a lot more. Okay, so now I've defined what 1.0 is. Let's get into the cool stuff.
Cool stuff.
Star Citizen, by its very nature, is a sandbox MMO. Today, you as a player have to find the fun. You have to figure out what you can do and how to do it. If you want to be a hauler or salvager, you have to know those professions exist. You have to know what ships support that gameplay. And you have to rely on outside resources for help. As it is now, the game is not set up to help you.
Yeah.
So we're going to add a soft framework, a nervous system, that connects all the professions, ships, and content together. And to do this, we're going to add a main story.
Okay.
To help.
So I don't play many MMOs. I don't know how main stories generally go. I'm assuming, though, that they won't force you to do all of these professions, but you get to kind of choose which ones you take part in. But I do think it's subtle here, the way that they're marking down that Hurston and Microtech are probably going to be the places where this game starts. At the end of the day, when 1.0 launches and we all load in for that first persistent moment, it's going to be either Microtech or Hurston, which is kind of crazy to me. We're starting on Hurston, the just worst freaking place that I can think of in human space. I mean, there's the terrible places, but they literally dump sewage on us. So, interesting highlight there.
To help new and existing players, to help discover all the exciting features and content we have, to take them on a journey of discovery of what the game has to offer. This story will become the spine of the universe and help onboard players with understanding how to play the game and understand what's available to them. This story will also introduce each of our guilds and what professions we have to offer. Like the United Resource Workers, our core industrial guild, which supports 2 of our main professions, mining and salvaging. They also support many other features and professions, like repair technician, crafter, and builder. Guilds are hugely important in Star Citizen, and as you know by now, guilds are comprised of many factions. As you work for each of these factions, you will gain guild reputation. You can then use this reputation as a currency to purchase guild-affiliated rewards, like ships, blueprints, and items. And each guild will have a unique inventory of what they offer. Alongside economic growth, guild reputation will become a core progression of the game. And to talk more about guilds and our main story, I'd like to introduce David Haddock onto the stage, our very own narrative director.
I do wonder how deep this goes, because this could go one of two ways. It could be an incredibly deep, super engaging main storyline, or it could also just be kind of like the missions we already, I don't want to say the missions we already do, the missions that you would do for these guilds at the time of 1.0, just stacked up in line with specific call-outs to go and pursue these missions, with a little narrative mixed in so that you're driven through it and you know what to do. There's just a lot of different possibilities of how they could do a storyline and have you interact with these guilds. And it could be super heavy-handed or super open. And they didn't go super in-depth with how they want to do it. But if we go by what the current mission givers are, I don't know how many of you have tried any of the mission givers, but you can look at kind of, I think Clovis Darnley is a solid example of how it works. Let's go to CitizenCon 2017, I think it was. Was it 2017? No, it was 2018. To show, I think, like, this is about the level that they would need to go into to get you into some kind of a mission.
Percentage, and then it will fade over time, and then you'll need to actually get fixed up here.
Stream is frozen? Y'all are frozen? Looks like we dropped a couple frames.
Hospital or by the Apollo or Endeavor.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the idea is the MedPen is a short-term solution that stops bleeding and lets you operate for a little while, but if you don't go and get longer-term fixed up, the bleeding will come back and you'll eventually die. So even with MedPens, you still need to go back and get medical help and fix yourself up, just like repairing you're like a ship. You repair yourself. So here we are, reclamation and disposal.
So this guy would be like a representative of a guild. It could be this lightweight. Sounds like Hurston.
Apologies. The air is especially dreadful today.
Yeah? Mac Johnson, thank you for the 5 community subs
Still
on Twitch.
alive,
Appreciate you.
I think. Hello. Welcome to Reclamation and Disposal. My name is Clovis Darnley. Wonderful to meet you. What can I do for you on this fine day?
Well,
Get us that old style inner thought
That's an
there.
excellent question.
This is in the game still.
If you're not
You can find this guy.
particularly concerned with shades of morality, I may have a lead on some, well, let's just call it questionable materials in need of forceful collection.
No problem,
The
officer.
devil's in the details, I believe. Read them well.
Vastin's giving away a pair of socks.
Okay, there's a satellite that's fallen from orbit and it has a prototype blade in it we want to
Interested?
check out. Yeah, let's do it.
Wonderful. Best of luck.
Am I missing?
Okay.
I'm not hearing Twitch exclamation point enter, guys, in chat. In Twitch chat specifically.
Mission, I guess. Yeah. Sure we got it. Oh, we're going to do a comm call. All right. We're going to ask one of our friends. Okay. Fingers crossed.
Yes. Definitely.
Hey, man.
There he is. Uh-oh. Hand's a bit weird.
Oh.
We all have friends who call us like this.
How's it going?
Oh my god.
Just chilling over here in Larval, waiting for us to check out one of their new ships.
Nice, man. Hey, look, I just got this mission. Apparently I need to go out to some location.
This is why they stopped doing keynotes.
If you want to.
All right. I think we got enough of that. So that is kind of the idea that I think they could do. if they just wanted to have like representatives of the guild in certain places that then point you towards like a to-do list or a list of tasks that you need to do for that guild and then turn them in and you get some rep. It's like light dressing. It's not like a full narrative thing with cinematics and all that kind of stuff. And I think that's doable for 1.0. If they're doing that for every guild, it actually makes more sense for them to do it that way if they want to get something like this done in the next 3 years. Congratulations to Cahill. Looks like you won yourself some socks, mate. Good for you.
Thank you, Rich. Hello, CitizenCon. How's it going?
So this is the dude who's had a lot of hand in writing Squadron too.
It's very exciting, and it's going to provide us probably our first real opportunity to finally inject a massive amount of narrative into the game. But we're looking to do that in several of ways. Now, Rich introduced the main story, so let's get into it. What exactly is that? First, it's a narrative experience. This will be a crafted story through the star systems and professions of the Star Citizen universe, taking players on an exciting adventure that will finally kick off the growing tension between Earth and Terra.
That's probably the most interesting part. That they are leaning into the whole political spectrum in the UEE and pitting Terra versus Earth. I wonder how long it is until we actually get Earth in the game. But the fact that they're using that as like the center point of the story is really exciting because you'd think they would just kind of rely on the Vanduul and the whole thing with them. But sort of like a Cold War lead up to a Civil War is pretty cool.
Yeah. It will be NPC driven. So while Squadron 42 will always be the place.
And I do shout out to the Astro Historian. I think he's going to do a good piece on this lore-wise. I would check him out if you're interested in the lore of this game because it's deep.
To go for AAA cinematic adventure. We're bringing a lot of the techniques that we learned from that to capture and build a cast of dynamic characters, some of which may be familiar, for both this story and the PU. And the main story is also designed to be sort of like a tour bus structure where you can hop on and hop off at any time you want to. So we're not also requiring you to do it. So if you want to log in day one and just go off and do your thing, you can do that. Or maybe you want to put the story on hold so you can go explore a new facet of gameplay that you just discovered. Go for it. The point is that you can complete it at your own pace.
That's nice.
So that's the what.
Novert, thank you for the sub.
Why do you want to do this? What's the motivation to want to go on this ride? Like Rich said, for new players, it's a great way to ease into sort of the vast lore that we've been developing over 12 years. The gameplay, the locations that the game has to offer, and also give you a sense of upcoming stories that are about to come. But you've been playing Star Citizen for years. You probably know the lore better than me. So what's in it for you? Now, of course, we'll have rewards along the way as you complete missions and whatnot, but we're finally going to offer a big prize for completing the story. Citizenship.
You got to serve for citizenship, baby. We're Starship Troopers now. Fulminous, thanks for the sub. I'm conflicted because I just said that like simple dressed up missions were a cool thing, but man, a deep story in this kind of setting where you're not military like in Squadron 42, but you're just like an everyday kind of person and you get to actually get involved more in the deep lore of Terra versus Earth, of faction versus faction. Like I'm thinking of quests that I went on in like Mass Effect or Cyberpunk where you get to understand the depth of the factions in local and like galactic and intergalactic stages and how they bounce off of each other. And that could be really interesting in this game. But at the same time, like, you know, obviously we all kind of want some level of sandbox to stand on its own. And a lot of people want the sandbox aspect of this game to be the dominant part.
So, many of you already know this, but for
you can have the same character between the two games.
There are citizens and there are civilians. Citizens are members of the population who have demonstrated a commitment to bettering the Empire, and as such are given benefits that civilians just don't have.
The Empire.
Now, what those differences have been debated in the community over years. 1.0, we're finally going to answer that debate. I won't get into the full list of benefits that we're going to offer. but can reveal
Slinsking,
that
thanks
one of
for the
them
sub.
Will be around land ownership.
Oh,
Citizens will be able to purchase land anywhere in the UEE and enjoy the security that comes with it. But civilians will have a couple of restrictions as to which systems and which planets they can buy on.
so like technically all of the pirates will be completely fine being civilians if they don't want land in official space. And I wonder how deep they go with that aspect. Like there's a lot you can do with the way citizens are treated versus civilians. We all living in the current year 2024, we all know this, and it would be interesting to see what they do with this and how testy they get with it.
So that's the why. So where is this adventure going to take you? Well, 1.0 is going to include 5-star systems. This story is going to weave you through all of them, but where exactly are you going to go?
You don't have to get Squadron to
First,
do this
we've
stuff
got
in Star
Stanton,
Citizen.
which needs very little introduction. I'm sure you're all very intimately familiar with these 4 corporate-run worlds. But since I do lore, I figure I could take the next hour and just walk through each one of these. But I'm kidding. We've also got Pyro, Land of the Lawless. A volatile star at the center of the system is the perfect metaphor for the constant
I
struggle.
love how all these planets, they're like, look at these gorgeous vistas with this land that you can go and land on. And then for Pyro 5, it's just like clouds.
Struggle between the gangs and survivors trying to hack out an existence here. If you saw Ian's location presentation yesterday, then you know that he reintroduced Nick's system. There's another unclaimed system that's currently home to the People's Alliance, a wannabe independent government formed during the Messer era, but now struggling with the burdens of governance, a growing outlaw presence, and a new threat on their doorstep from Vandal raids.
Okay, hold on. Lore folks in the chat, did we ever know that they were dealing in Nyx with Vandal raids? Is that a little lore slip? B5, I'll catch you later. Thanks for hanging out. Like if we go into the history, left unclaimed, Glacium Ring, Messer regime moved into vacated mining facilities, safe space beyond UEE's reach, political dissidents, a place to hide for small criminals, tensions are high. Is there anything in here about the Vandal? I don't think there is. I know we know that it bordered there, but I don't see anything. There's nothing in the wiki about Vandal raids in the Nyx system. How about Galactopedia? Because that sounds like some interesting possible gameplay for Star Citizen in the Nyx system. Galactopedia is always pretty light on details. Yeah, I don't think that's something that we were particularly privy to before. We know it's bordering Vandal systems, but we've never heard that Vandal is actually raiding into Nyx. That could be like the main gameplay thing that separates Nyx from the other systems. Obviously, it's unaffiliated and it's not as high in crime as Pyro. But that's a very interesting possibility for Nyx.
Formed during the Messer era, but now struggling with the burdens of governance, a growing outlaw presence, and a new threat on their doorstep from Vandal raids.
Talked about it when they were introducing Nyx.
Ian also made another big announcement of our 4th system, Castra. Situated along the former Perry line, this was a key strategic system to launch an attack if the Cold War between the humans and the Xi'an ever escalated. So that's 4.
So we got 2 potential systems that are looking at alien involvement, Castra and Nyx, that are in Star Citizen 1.0. And both the Xi'an and the Vandal, I don't know if we will see the Xi'an in terms of their actual player, or not player, but like character models in Squadron 42, but we've seen their ship. So we know that the Xi'an are involved in Squadron 42, at least by ship. We know that the Vandal character models are worked on and plenty developed for Squadron 42. I wonder if we will see both of those aliens in Star Citizen 1.0, despite them not really talking about it specifically.
Do you guys want to know 5?
And this just makes sense. For starters, we know they've been working on lava. I couldn't tell you the exact episode where they mentioned it, but lava is coming from their river simulations they've been working on. We know they've been working on swamps and forests and jungles, which is very much a thing on the Terra homeworld, Terra Prime, or I guess the planet's called Terra, the city's called Prime. And then Gen is beautiful. This whole freaking, God, the Terra system. I'm excited for this one, but this one's a long ways away. Rycops, thank you for the super chat on YouTube, man.
Yeah. We're finally doing it. Considered by many to be the new jewel of the Empire, Terra has been a shining star against the more imperialistic tendencies of Earth, even in the darkest days of the Messer regime. Now, many believe that Terra should be the new center of the UEE. I don't know how you all feel about that. Yeah, a lot of division. But that's our starting 5. Each system and each planet will be featuring the massive level of outposts, POIs, stations, biomes, and exploration options that we've been perfecting with Stanton and Pyro, and you've been seeing in some of the other presentations this weekend. But we're adding one more level. We're also going to be adding location stories. Now, these will be short, NPC-driven missions sprinkled across our landing zones and cities that will exist outside of the main story, but will help provide an additional bit of lore and character to the location that they take place in. So, that's our main story.
Dude, Shubin's
got
so much power.
That Rich mentioned.
Look at them. Shubin's got fuel recovery. They've got all the mining stuff. They've got the refining stuff. Shubin's a scary company, man. And they've done some pretty messed up stuff in the past. Somebody asked what the excitement about Terra is. Terra Prime is... Well, for starters, Terra will be the only system in this group that is both Metropolis dominated and UEE controlled. So it's a high security, heavily populated system. Stanton is a mid-security system, and it's controlled by companies. Pyro is a low-security system controlled by gangs. Nyx is a low-security system controlled by an unaffiliated group. Castra is a high-security system, but it's pretty lightly populated. Terra is the center of humanity, and it will offer a absolute load of activities, of factions, of places to visit, of things to do. In fact, I think on this one they only listed one landing zone. I don't know if there were 2 landing zones on Terra before in the Arc Star map. But if you look at the Arc Star map itself, the Terra system is a very interesting system to get involved with. It's like Earth, but better. And there's a lot of people who are also, yeah, there we go. Earth is the center of humanity. So there's a disagreement between both people in the game and people outside of the game as to where humanity is centered around. But if you look at humanity and the way it's spread out across the verse, you have Earth over here. Then you have a pretty long trade lane that goes between Earth all the way to Terra, which is over here. And this is kind of like your dichotomy of humanity. Terra has a lot of connections, though. And it also has some amazing planets all located in the green band. So they're easily habitable. You've got an asteroid cluster out here. You've got an asteroid belt even further out, and you've got like 4 or 5 jump points, I think. And then also Terra connects to obviously Stanton, which is like the shopping mall of humanity. And what else does it connect to? Pyro, unfortunately. It's a really interesting system. Much more interesting than anything we've seen so far, as you could see from like the pictures they were using there. Rogue Ice, thank you for the sub as well on Twitch.
First, a quick recap. Guilds act as a governing body for clusters of professions and factions with a reputation and progression system that will offer rewards the more you work for them. And I want to call out 2 things. One, I'm not going to have time to dive into all of the missions that you're going to see on this board, but just know that every mission type is either in the 1.0 roadmap or already in production. And second, we're also looking to move missions away from the Moby Glass whenever possible. Sure, it will always be an easy way for us to get additional game content in, but we want you talking with people. So
there goes your
aid that,
just thinking that they're missions on the Moby
We're going to be
Glass.
adding characters to represent the factions that you'll be working for that will help sell their personality. Now, some, they'll still interact with you via the written word, but some will call and check in on your performance. And others, you may have to meet in person from time to time.
Super standard.
So, let's walk through them. Here we have the first guild.
It's going to be interesting to see the people that you're going to meet in person. Are they going to instance those people so that you're not waiting in line to talk to a mission giver? This is like one of the longest standing questions ever since they started introducing mission givers back in the day with Miles Eckhart.
Showed United Resource Workers. Whether you're eager to earn credits, mining valuable resources from remote corners of the universe, sifting through detritus to try and salvage some valuable components, or even just acting as a technician, you'll find plenty to do with employers like Shubin Interstellar, United Wayfarers Club, and more. Next, you have one of the oldest unions in the UEE, the Interstellar Transport Guild. This will be the go-to place for everybody looking to make their fortune hauling and trading. Some of the factions that many of you already work for now, such as Ling Family Haul.
Keep in mind here, this is something that we talked about a little bit yesterday. There is a passenger delivery here. So passenger transport is planned for 1.0, according to at least the guilds they have here.
Hauling, Redwind, and FTL. And we're going to be adding something special for the daredevils out there. The Imperial Sports Federation.
Freaking parkour athlete. Parkour athlete? What does that mean? Cargo Olympics, though. Cargo Olympics. Okay, we kind of joked about this when they first started bringing in the physicalized cargo hauling stuff. Cargo Olympics is, I want to know more.
Legitimate and illegitimate. We're actually going to be leveraging some of our existing mechanics to build new sports and provide an outlet for all you Murray Cup enthusiasts, cargo Olympians.
No, they did not give a date to this.
Competitors to see just who's the best out there.
But honestly, would you believe it if they did?
For those who dream of exploring, I'm sure we have a couple here. We have the Academy of Sciences that was brought up yesterday in the social presentation, if you saw that. This is a science guild that will include factions like the Imperial Cartography Center, who will task you with a variety of missions to better understand our universe.
This is so much work, man. Oh man, this is so much work. Like we have some of these missions already, but we know that they're going to be reworked with the mission refactor that we're getting with 4.0. And I'm wondering if part of the reason that they waited to tell all this stuff was until they could get these things worked on, but I don't know. I mean, like farming missions could be something as simple as go harvest these from these animals out on that farm, or that could be something as complex as capture these animals, domesticate them, and then use them for so and so amount of time until you get this amount of crop and goods. And it's like, even though we're getting this all listed out, which is great, I love the detail that we're getting this explained in, I still do wonder just how in-depth any of these things will go. And I wonder when we'll start to learn that. Like, when do we start to get the real first examples of how these interactions will go in Star Citizen? They said 12 to 18 months for something like monster hunting or base building. So obviously we have that as a bit of a timeline to know when this stuff happens. But could it be that the stuff they've been working on over the last, say, 2 years, investigation missions, mining missions, we never saw those things pop up? Could it be that they just straight up said, hold on, we're not going to do these. We're going to wait until we have 1.0 in a good place where we understand what we want to do so that we can rework these and then launch them over time after 4.0 comes in. Maybe we see some of this stuff 4.2, 4.3, and that's where we start to get our first ideas of it. I don't really know, but there's a lot of possibilities here that could dictate very different timelines for how we start to experience this stuff. glad to know that we're getting a full-on science-focused guild, though. I think that makes a lot of people happy.
Such as sending you into a nebula to do deep scans, or finally seeing what's at the bottom of that planetary canyon. We're going to have a new faction called High Point Wilderness Specialists, who will offer missions associated with the various fauna that we're starting to get into the game, from population control missions to harvesting specific resources for research. Now, I don't know if we have some people who'd like to do combat, but our combat guilds were doing something a little different. Now, previous to this, these are all of our profession guilds.
Yeah, it doesn't mean none of it's coming sooner.
Guilds,
some of it's probably coming
a little
sooner.
Differently. See, these two are diametrically opposed to each other. So once you pledge allegiance to one, the other marks you as an enemy. On the lawful side, we have the Mercenary Guild. They represent factions like Eckhart Security.
Sorry, I'm pausing a lot, but there's just a lot to see here. There is a mission that used to get talked about in the monthly reports that we never saw. I'm just now remembering. It was, some of you might remember this. They talked about a mission in which you would be escorting NPCs as they flew around the Stanton system. But specifically, they mentioned that there would be tasks you'd have to carry out while you were doing this. And one of those tasks, the way they said it, made it sound like you were on the ship with the NPC. You weren't just flying a ship near them. And that kind of reminds me of this patrol kind of stuff. And I wonder, again, there's another set of missions that they talked about, but then they didn't put out, and they might have just held on to until they could refactor all the missions and then drop them in within the first 4 or 5 updates after 4.0 on a system that actually works with the stuff that they did. I'm going to have to go back and try and find that stuff because I don't remember where it is.
The Bounty Hunters Guild, and even some military contractors. So whether you're pulling together a team of specialists to go assault a ground base, hunting down an elusive criminal, or putting together a recon run to drum up some intel, Mercenary Guild's got you covered.
Scanning area and location mapping is
side,
interesting.
We have the Council. Now, this is a shadowy group comprised of representatives from various gangs, syndicates, and outlaws who mandate criminal activity throughout the verse.
Data running would be kind of integrated into this, I think, in the Science Guild mostly.
Or work your way up to join highline criminal syndicates like the Atonis or the Drop Kings. But remember, the underworld is a dangerous place run by greed and power. So Mercenary Guild reps might not be the only people you have to worry about, as the syndicates are always looking for loyal soldiers who will hurt their competition and tip the scales of power in their favor. So as you can see, there's going to be a universe of exciting storytelling opportunities for you to undertake in 1.0. But one more thing, we're also going to revitalize our social behaviors.
I think a solo PvP player would be here, in this area. Arguably, you wouldn't experience as much PvP here, but you would probably experience it more as you get into the sandbox gameplay. I think this stuff is mostly PvE, but it does lead into that kind of gameplay. As you're learning the trade, you're getting more of the guilds that might support that kind of gameplay.
The syndicates are going to be a universe of exciting storytelling opportunities for you to undertake in 1.0. But one more thing, we're also going to revitalize our social behaviors to make the populations not only feel more alive and reactive and off chairs, but better reflect the tone and flavor of the areas that they're inhabiting. We want to see the people of Loreville slowly trudging through the streets, overburdened by the ruthless contracts, just as much as we want to see the tourists of Orison gleefully moving from attraction to attraction. And all of this is what's going to make Star Citizen be the experience we set out to make. A diverse universe with a rich tapestry of stories, characters, and experiences for you to live in. To talk more about how all this feeds back into player progression, I'm going to turn it back over to Rich Tyler.
So something that's not really talked about here is what they talked about the day before in the Municipal Works and R-Corp. And that is like the dungeon aspect of this stuff, the contested zones that they're bringing in, the dungeons. This gets into how you factor in with the guilds, but in terms of these locations that they are seemingly making that are instanced and offering different types of gameplay in like bite-sized packages. There's not a ton of talk about how that fits into this, and I think that's the kind of stuff that maybe you're looking for as a solo PvP person, but generally as solo players, those kind of instanced areas and contested zones would be important. And there's not as much talk about that. Also, yeah, that journalism gameplay. Not sure I see that here, really, which is a good call out.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so we have a main story to connect the universe. We have all the guilds and their associated professions, and we have location stories to give the world depth and life. Crucially, though, we have a new core progression in the game, guild reputation. But what about our other core progression in the game? The economy. So, as we've discussed before, we'll be implementing a star sim-powered dynamic economy that will automatically adjust the in-game prices based on player activity. But for credits to actually matter, though, we need to have an economy where credits flow out as well as in. This means transactions such as repairing, refueling, and restocking need to have value. If everything is too cheap and the money coming into the economy is too great, we'll have massive inflation.
So this is where I think we miss a little bit of what they've described for their economy before.
All of a sudden they started stockpiling.
This is like a ton of detail, right? And maybe they don't need to go into this much detail. But there's, oh no, this isn't even what I want. I want quantum quasar. Here we go. So this starts talking about stuff like virtual AI, right? Bringing back to Tony.
First, a quick review. Quantum is a simulation of the game universe, and its purpose is to allow things, the price
This is what Star Sim was before it was called Star Sim.
of goods at a given shop, the amount of piracy near a landing zone, or what missions are being offered, to evolve and change over time in logical and realistic ways. It does this by simulating hundreds of thousands of lightweight NPCs called quanta, whose AI logic is focused on just those aspects needed to produce the required information.
It's also why the simulation was called quantum and not quanta. But that's a nitpick.
Upon a small list of attributes, each quanta makes its own decisions using the same resources, shops, and jobs as players. The simulation will need to calculate many millions of decisions per minute, and thus the AI behavior of quanta is focused on the most economically impactful details, which lets quantum focus all of its processing power on just those things that truly matter. Every quanta possesses its own unique set of attributes that influence how well it performs and how it perceives opportunities. The initial implementation of attributes will have two main categories, proficiencies and traits. Proficiencies act like a multiplier on how well quanta perform a given task. Different jobs will require different proficiencies, and higher proficiencies will equate to superior execution. Traits describe what kind of jobs a quanta prefers to do by modifying their perceived value of the job. Each job will have a specific alignment, and when a quanta's traits match up with the job's alignment, they will perceive the payout of that job to be higher. To illustrate the concept, let's take two jobs on either end of the aggression scale and suppose, for now, that they pay out the same. Now, let's create a quanta with an average aggression rating. This quanta is no closer to the aggression alignment of factory worker than they are to security, so it's no surprise that for this quanta, the payout for both jobs looks the same. However, as we decrease the aggression rating of this quanta, we can see that the perceived amount of money for both jobs changes. Again, the actual pay hasn't changed at all, only the perceived value from that quanta's point of view. It's still possible for the quanta to choose security, but in this case, security would need to pay 4 times as much. If we change this quanta's aggression trait to be very high, the opposite happens. Now, the aggressive security job looks like it pays much more, and the peaceful factory worker jobs appear to pay much less.
So this is all about basically how do NPCs act in the game while we're all doing our own thing? Are they like, why would certain types of jobs cycle through faster than others? If you were doing a simple patrol mission versus a target and kill this NPC mission, would the patrol mission stick around longer than the target the NPC mission? And in what locations would that be true for? Would it be the same in Terra as it is in Hurston or in Stanton? Same in Prime as it is in Lorville? That kind of thing. And this is all super interesting. It's a ton of detail that I understand they couldn't get into when they're down there in the doing a Star Citizen 1.0 talk about everything there is. But I do wonder how much of this still sticks in Star Sim, because we haven't really had any sort of confirmation on this since 2021.
Different product nodes, and you can see all of the economic relationships for those items laid out on the graph. The graph allows us to switch between several key flows, like the volume of goods, the flow of UEC, and even the value density of specific routes in the universe. The nodes are ordered by greatest to least economic activity, and changes over time will reorder them. We can thus detect important shifts in the economy simply by observing how the nodes adjust their position. This tool can inspect both real-time and historical data, so we can step back in time and see the progression of factors that caused a problem to develop and what could be done to remedy it. When inspecting a segment of time, you can see elements of the economy phasing in and out, depending.
This I do think is very much still included in Star Sim. This is like basic supply and demand kind of stuff, and it goes deeper to the idea that there are caves with certain minerals, there are factories that mine certain or that refine certain minerals, and then there are factories that create certain objects that are sold to certain stores. And this is all part of their whole Starkitecture thing, I imagine. But I also wonder how this factors into base building when you start having player-made factories and player-made refineries and stuff.
Upon what
Tony is still at CIG, yes. I had some folks in our community ran into him back in May, and they talked to him, and he said he was still working there. He was still doing his own stuff. He had passed some stuff on to the more dedicated economy team, but he was still busy at CIG. Yeah.
Whether or not they were relevant during that period. Often we'll want to dig into a particular material.
I don't think that they did iterate that nothing has changed but the name. The only thing that they really reiterated here is that Star Sim is a dynamic economy. But do we know if virtual AI is still a thing? Do we know if AI will still become mission givers naturally from becoming a point of conflict in the verse?
Creation of a freighter, which itself becomes a VNPC so that it can react to what's happening via its own virtual AI. Dragon now engages the freighter. He starts firing on it. He's still within range of an active comm array, and thus this latest crime is added to his character history. He's now wanted for both murder and piracy, and the bounty on him just jumped from 6 to 10,000 UEC. Increasing the size of their rap sheet and the price on their head is one of the simplest forms of VNPC evolution, and over time we'll look to add additional ways for VNPCs to grow and increase their influence, from recruiting followers in an attempt to become a shipping magnate or a crime boss to offering their own missions.
That's an amazing thing, in my opinion. The idea that an NPC can eventually become dangerous or infamous enough naturally to become a mission giver that assigns missions to others is an incredible it's an incredible aspect to have for your NPCs in the game, and I don't think that they've reiterated that clearly enough, if that's still a thing or if they're going a different direction with that. What they have definitely made clear though is that these probability volumes will still be a thing, and I think that's a big part of this system.
The amount of security, you'll get less piracy, and vice versa. Security tends to congregate closer to the landing facilities and dissipate as you get farther out, and thus piracy tends to gradually increase with distance. The likelihood of an encounter is represented by the height of the curve at that distance. Notice that the chances of running into a freighter, the green curve, is pretty much constant because once a ship has decided to make the journey to or from Port Olisar, it's committed. They've already decided whether or not the risk is worth the reward of traveling the full route. I'm now going to activate the lockdown phase of this event, which is going to crank up the amount of piracy in the selected area and overwhelm security. The red curve, piracy, now has a much larger average height, equating to an increased encounter probability, and because pirates now greatly outnumber security, the curve pushes in much closer to the landing zone. The criminals are emboldened because there's no longer sufficient security to deter them.
This is what happens during the blockade runner event, kind of.
The blue curve, security, looks identical, although Quantum will, over time, start adjusting the economic levers to gradually increase the amount of security to combat the threat by offering greater rewards. Increased piracy has had an immediate impact, though, on freighter traffic, which has dropped precipitously. This means that the local economy will start to seize up. They won't be able to import food, medicine, fuel, or whatever else they need, and they won't be able to export whatever goods and services they produce. All of these knock-on effects are only possible because designers will now be able to nudge the economic gears in proper systemic fashion. Let's test one of these knock-on effects.
So yeah, mission probability volumes, that's always been a thing, and they've been testing it and they've worked on it. But as far as the economy goes, StarSim goes.
Dynamic economy. As we've discussed before, we'll be implementing a StarSim-powered dynamic economy that will automatically adjust the in-game prices based on player activity.
They didn't say anything about missions here. So I don't know where you're getting that idea. It does talk about dynamic pricing, which is amazing. Thank God we're getting that. But in terms of mission availability, who's giving missions, how those missions are being assigned, whether NPCs are continuing to be virtual when they're not subsumptive, whether they are maintaining a memory that keeps in mind which players they've run into, that kind of stuff, that's sort of skipped over here. And I'm not saying that's terrible, not saying the sky is falling, but I am noticing that they don't mention that, and I do wonder if they will get back to that, or if that's just kind of something they're going to be like, hey, it's happening, don't worry about it. Just, trust it. Blockade Runner's pretty fun. I have a good time with it.
But for credits to actually matter, though, we need to have an economy where credits flow out as well as in. This means transactions such as repairing, refueling, and restocking need to have value. If everything is too cheap and the money coming into the economy is too great, we'll have massive inflation. And this is where taxes and insurance come in.
We need this. We need this talk so badly. Luna Maria, how's it going?
We'll have two main taxes: inheritance tax as part of Death of a Spaceman, and security tax for your base that will cover the cost of planetary shield tech. Insurance, on the other hand, will be split between medical insurance, which covers your hospital imprints, and probably the most important one of all, ship insurance. Now, as we have
implants, just kind of brushed over that real quick, but we've talked about that a couple of times on this stream. We know that we are going to have cybernetics. So they're very clearly still sticking to Death of a Spaceman. We don't know what the details of that are. No point in assuming that they are the exact same, but they're talking about implants, and they're talking about inheritance tax, which are two of the big parts of what that's supposed to be. So you take enough damage over time as you're dying, quote unquote, then you have to get implants because maybe your arm got absolutely crushed in the your last life. You end up dying too much. You got to pay an inheritance tax and pass yourself all your goods and your ships and stuff down to a new character that you created. Sounds like those are still included. Say implants or imprints? I'm pretty sure you said implants.
the most important one of all.
Oh, he did say imprints.
Insurance, on the other hand, will be split between medical insurance, which covers your hospital imprints.
He said imprints, you're right. So maybe they're not doing implants. Maybe they are, though. But he said imprints.
Probably the most important one of all, ship insurance.
So in terms of Death of a Spaceman, inheritance tax is still a thing. Imprints are still a thing. But he didn't actually say anything about implants.
Now, as we have Death of a Spaceman, we also need Death of a Spaceship. Losing your ship should be significant. Right now, for example, over 90% of all claims in the verse are for ships that have not been destroyed. And this is where ship insurance and our new warranty mechanic comes in. First up, we'll have 3 tiers of insurance, with level 1 being chassis insurance, level 2, chassis and component insurance, and level 3, chassis, component, and decorations insurance.
This is such an important topic.
Now, insurance by itself will only pay out credits based on the wear and age of your ship. Insurance, I think you want to listen to this bit because it's important. Insurance with a warranty, though, will give you back a new ship, plus any other equipment or decorations based on the tier of insurance you had. Okay, so this is the bit you need to listen to. All ships bought on the pledge store will come with a permanent warranty and their appropriate insurance.
See, that's them basically saying you can lose your ship, right? Your insurance only pays out credits, so you do not get the ship back if you lose it and make an insurance claim. You have to also have a warranty on your ship. But if you bought your ship with real money, then you automatically always have a warranty. So this is the way of them saying, if you bought a ship with real money, it will always be able to be gotten back. Granted, we don't know how long it will take to get it back and all those kinds of details, but you will always be able to get it back. If you buy a ship in-game and you do not get a warranty on it, then you can lose your ship. It's like the fly without rebuy from Elite Dangerous, right? You want to make sure that you have enough money or you have enough service to cover the ship that you are flying, because there is a chance in this game that you can lose everything you have on you if you're not insuring it or getting a warranty on it. And I think that's pretty important. That's kind of how they've always laid the game out. And then we'll get onto the whole LTI thing. It's honestly, it's a little pay to play, but I also think it's kind of legal. Like, I'm pretty sure if they were able to remove a ship that somebody paid real money for, they'd be in a lot more legal trouble than anything else. So it's kind of a no-brainer to make sure that people who have paid real money for stuff can always keep that stuff.
Now, insurance by itself will only pay out credits based on the wear and age of your ship. Insurance, I think you want to listen to this bit because it's important. Insurance with a warranty, though, will give you back a new ship, plus any other equipment or decorations based on the tier of insurance you had.
Yeah, you'll be able to get warranties in game.
Okay, so this is the bit you need to listen to.
That'd be crazy.
All ships bought on the pledge store will come with a permanent warranty and their appropriate insurance.
Yeah, let's hear what they have to say about warranties.
This means you will always get your ships back if they're attributed to your account. Other ships, on the other hand, will require a transferable warranty, and these are rare.
Okay. So then, if transferable warranties are rare, that means that ships bought in-game are less likely to always be around when you use them. This creates an artificial demand which boosts crafting, but it also creates that feeling of FOMO that you want to buy the ship with real money.
Hand will require a transferable warranty, and these are rare. You'll be able to earn transferable warranties in-game, such as by completing the main story, as an example, and apply them to any of the ships you own. But there will be a cooldown for transferring it between ships, so choose wisely.
Okay, I see. So transferable in the sense that you can apply it to different ships as you want. You can say, have a main ship that you fly for a year, and then when you're done with that ship, you want a different one, you want a new ship that's your daily driver, you can move that warranty to a different ship. It's not always applied permanently, which is nice, but still the fact that it's rare and the only way they've mentioned being able to earn it so far is by completing the story, I guess that also creates a pretty big in-game reward for certain things.
Cooldown for transferring it between ships, so choose wisely. Now, what about claim timers? It's another fun topic. And getting your ship back without a claim. Well, we want claim timers to be proportional to the crafting timers. This means it's more beneficial for you to go back and get your original ship. For this, we're going to be introducing a shuttle ship, just like a courtesy car.
Guessing that's just an AI flown ship that takes you back to wherever it is you lost the ship. So you'll always have some kind of a beacon on that ship, I guess. I wonder how that works when you're like in a fleet battle and your ship just practically gets ripped in half. How much do you have to do to bring that ship back to life? But this also factors into the fact that after 4.0, you won't be seeing ships just blow up. They will now start to take damage and be disabled as opposed to just completely ripped apart and annihilated. Yeah, one of the things they announced today is a main story they're working on. Or yesterday.
You'll be able to claim the shuttle at no extra cost to most locations and then fly it back to your original ship. Once back in your ship, the shuttle will automatically return home.
Oh boy, thanks for the sub.
If your ship has been legitimately lost, though, then you'll need to claim it back. And as we'll be increasing claim timers, this will mean some ships will take longer than others, with starter or small ships always being readily available, and larger capital-sized ships taking a long time. So it's always better to try and get your ship back if possible. Okay, so we've talked about our two core progressions.
Escapeth, thank you for the super chat, custom colors and decals. We'll see how far they go with it.
It means we have a framework where we can start creating cyclical gameplay loops. But what are they? Let me show you. Okay, so right now in live, if you have a prospector, you probably enjoy mining. And the reward for mining is credits and the enjoyment of the activity. But in 1.0, you might be mining for a whole different reason. And this is where cyclical gameplay loops come in. Firstly, let's add all the manufacturers and ships in. I'll just give you a moment to take that in, because there's a lot. I actually had to ask them to take the variants out, because it didn't fit on this slide.
Who has the most ships? I feel like it's Anvil. There's a lot of... I mean, this isn't even just ships, this is vehicles. There's a lot of vehicles from Anvil. Drake has a bunch, too, though. Aegis also has a bunch. I think Drake, Aegis, Anvil, and RSI tend to have the most vehicles. And that's kind of always been the way it is, too. I remember they worked on a lot of Aegis ships pretty early on, up until like 2018, 2019. Yeah, CNOU has not very many ships. Technically, in lore, CNOU is only like 60 years old, 70 years old. So, I mean, if you go by that, then it makes sense. But I think people want to see more ships from them, definitely.
To ask them to take the variants out, because it didn't fit on this slide. And let's zoom all the way into the prospector, a stalwart of the mining community. But let's say I really fancy acquiring a military Mark II Hornet. Let's go on a simplified journey of how I could get one. Firstly, I know I won't be able to buy it, as it's a military ship, so I'm going to need to craft it. That means I will need the fabrication hangar blueprint. Luckily, I can earn it by doing mining missions to gain rep with the United Resource Workers, and I already have the perfect ship, my trusty prospector. With blueprint in hand and some excess credits, I can now purchase a small plot of land on Stanton and build my fabrication hangar. Step 1, complete. Now I need to grab the Mark II Hornet blueprint. For this, I need mercenary rep, and more importantly, a combat ship. With that in mind, I will do a few more mining contracts to earn enough credits to purchase a Mustang from the dealership. Now I can start doing combat pilot missions for the Mercenary Guild, so I can unlock the Mark II Hornet blueprint. Okay, step 2 of our simplified loop is complete. I have the Mark II blueprint, but I need the resources to craft it. So I come full circle back to my prospector, but this time I'm mining for resources instead. As you can see, this closes the loop. No longer am I mining just because I like it, and there's nothing wrong with that. But now I am mining for a purpose and for multiple reasons. For credits, for reputation, for resources, for blueprints, and ultimately as a stepping stone to crafting my own ships to enjoy other professions. And this is just one of many loops. This is the core of Star Citizen 1.0.
But then, oops, you lose your prospector and you didn't have insurance. Wah, wah. I don't know. This sounds pretty similar to other games like Eve and Elite Dangerous, but I'd love to hear from people who have actually played those games. The idea of being able to lose things, having that risk of losing things, being able to do things to avoid losing those things, and working to gain other things that kind of mitigate losing those things, this kind of falls in line with those other games, right? Yeah, not confusing the warranty and insurance. Say you don't have any warranty whatsoever. If you have insurance or you don't have insurance and you lose the ship, you're not even getting money back to go and buy these things again. You're just out of luck.
Player set goals that weave between sandbox gameplay and the soft framework we are adding that give meaning and progression to our professions and features. It's providing the framework for motivation to play the game. That's the journey, though. What about the destination? So Dave has already discussed Citizenship and the main story, so let's collapse that for now. Let's talk about endgame content. The content that is designed for experienced players and keeps them engaged. Basically everyone in this room.
No, I think the one thing that's really going to bug people is that obviously you fall victim to bugs and glitches even after they've figured out the problems that plague this game, after server meshing comes in and makes things more stable on the back end and they've been able to optimize everything and finally launch a 1.0, we'll still have bugs and glitches, and that's going to suck. That's definitely going to suck to us to an extent. And there do need to be like stopgaps that help people still recover from catastrophic bugs without losing everything all from just one mistake, or one problem. There need to be tiers of things that can catch you as you're falling down based on bugs that allows you to still recover and not lose everything. Maybe you have to go and get like repairs or something. Maybe you have to make a claim, but at least you don't lose everything all at once because of a bug or a glitch.
So how does that look in 1.0? Firstly, we'll have open world content, including missions, group missions, and server-wide events, like we have today, but tailored to endgame players. While the sandbox element of Star Citizen will allow...
Keep in mind, he does emphasize missions are separate from group missions, so they're still looking out for players who are doing things on their own, who are trying to do solo endgame kind of stuff in that sandbox environment.
For large-scale battles, we also want to provide challenging instanced content that will take full advantage of not only multi-crew ships, but fleets of ships. And you kind of know how we do that, right? You saw that yesterday.
I don't think you can't say PvP and orgs are the content when he specifically said people who want to do missions separate from group missions. That's a very clear distinction that this is not PvP, this is not groups, this is not orgs. These are just missions that exist in the game.
And as you progress through the guilds, you'll be able to accept high-level contracts from government agencies who will offer prototype and military blueprints as rewards. These missions will require the full coordination of multiple players and an assorted fleet of capital, support, and fighter ships.
I do find this interesting, though, and I wonder what you guys have to say about this. If they're instancing fleet battles, is it necessary for dynamic server meshing to be able to support fleet battles? Like, can you just forego server meshing if you're still going to instance those fleet battles themselves? What's the story there? As a non-dev, I don't necessarily know the intricacies of what the difference between an instanced fleet battle and a fleet battle that's taking place out in the world and in the environment, but is able to utilize server meshing, dynamic server meshing particularly, to still have that happen in that open sandbox where anybody can run into it, but it's not hampering the load of the rest of the area.
You will finally be able to become the admiral of the fleet, directing your armada from your hologlobe, which, yes, is a feature included in 1.0.
I'm going to be Bishop.
We will also be offering more specialized on-foot missions that see you enter the depths of distribution centers and municipal works in small, tight-knit squads that provide an outlet for our more FPS-focused players.
Again, I think that's your solo gameplay right there. Distribution centers, municipal works, bunkers, forward operating bases, that kind of stuff is the stuff you could take on by yourself if you really wanted to.
A dynamic layer powered by StarSim. While StarSim will be the driving force in our dynamic economy, it will also track player and AI activity and dynamically spawn events based on their actions.
So those are the probability volumes, but that's still rather, that's still not very specific for as in-depth as they've gone with StarSim. I'm interested in, I hope there's like a Star Citizen Live or something where they touch back on it and talk about the details of how they're including that in the tracking of missions and how that spawns with AI. Whether virtual AI is still a thing, I think is a really important one I'd love to hear.
For example, if it tracks large amounts of resources being moved from one home location to another, it will have a chance to spawn pirates to intercept. All this combined will provide just a portion of the endgame experience. And I'd love to delve deeper, but that's for another day, as we still have a lot to show.
When is that day, Rich?
So we've discussed non-combat professions and guilds, cyclical gameplay loops, and endgame PVE content. But what about PvP? Yeah. What about player versus player content? As you know, 1.0 will contain 5 star systems, 3 of these being lawful in Stanton, Castra, and Terra, and 2 of them being unlawful in Pyro and Nyx. So what's the difference? Let's take a look at Stanton. Lawful systems will be a mixture of high, medium, and low security areas. Each of these...
I love that they're specifying this in this talk specifically, that a lawful system is not just lawful areas. There are also dangerous areas within lawful systems, because that's the way things are. You know, you could have the safest place, but there will still be places where people find a way to do dangerous things. And being able to display that to folks when they're flying around a system like Stanton, which is a rather mixed system, is going to really help people understand what is actually something that might be considered quote unquote griefing versus what is just piracy that happens in a place where you're not expecting it.
Areas will be monitored by law enforcement agencies. And depending on the location, will dictate the emergency response time, with high-sec areas being the fastest. Initially, this response will be measured, but over time will escalate to overwhelming force. This means if someone is attacked, if they can just hold out for a short duration, help will be on the way.
That's something we just don't have right now. And that really screws up the perception of what this game is supposed to be.
Pirates will be able to disrupt this monitoring by shutting down the nearby comm arrays, but this will be highlighted in your star map, with dynamic missions being generated to bring it back online. But this is the PvP you already know and experience right now, just without security forces. But before we jump into an unlawful system, let's explore what options you have if you pirate a ship. Okay, so first up, let's discuss ownership. All ships and high-value items that you own will...
Honestly, I think that in these high-security systems, in a high-security area, security should be there within like 10 to 20 seconds. It doesn't even have to be realistic. But that's what makes it so that people don't want to do crime as much, and that's what they need in these locations. He didn't really say whether or not in this talk they were going to continue onward with the idea that we would be free to have weapons and stuff everywhere, and they would just have security and law enforce that stuff, or if they were going to stick with armistice zones and green zones and stuff. But if they do decide to do the former option there, then security should be on you like that, just right away. Yes, you have the possibility of committing a crime here, but you're basically screwed if you do, and you need to bring overwhelming force otherwise. And then bringing that overwhelming force is a high financial investment. It's a high investment of your ships and components that you have to risk. You're not getting insured as much because you are on that side of the law. All that kind of stuff factors in the ability for people to decide whether or not they actually want to commit a crime in a place like that. But it still allows people to pull a weapon out whenever they want. Or it allows people to get the ability to have a weapon in a certain place because they have a certain reputation. Those kinds of things like that freedom and possibility is such a big thing that brought me to this game. And I hope they stick with that and they just use the ability to have really, really fast and hardcore response times for security to make that more of a possibility. Obviously, there's always a way to cheese the system. And I think that there will be edge cases when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I love this idea of just fast and hardcore response times for security, but you can still do things within that window that security gives you. And then obviously, if you get further away, the time goes up 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 120 seconds, whatever it might be. But I think that would be a great way to base the system, and I hope they continue forward with that.
Discuss ownership. All ships and high-value items that you own will automatically be assigned to you. This means if someone steals your ship, you can mark it as stolen, either via an insurance claim or in your Mobi.
This is pretty cool.
This will then trigger a dead man switch on the stolen ship, meaning it will cease to function after a period of time.
This is really cool.
Well, what options does this leave as a pirate? Well, you can still salvage it. You can tow it back to your fabrication hangar to dismantle it for resources. Or, if you have a high enough rep with the council, our criminal guild, you can get the dead man switch disabled and pay for a new title deed to become its new owner.
That is so sick to me because that then starts to there's actually a use for scrapyards. And I hear you about people making mistakes and accidentally killing someone. I think that would be the difference between having a reputation and having a crime stat. If you don't have a crime stat and you have a high reputation in the area, then accidentally killing someone maybe will wipe out your rep, but it might not make you kill on sight. Whereas if you didn't have a good reputation, which is more of a long-term thing, and you killed someone in the area, then they might be like, okay, you're completely negative now, you're kill on sight kind of thing. I don't know if that'll work all the time. I think there's going to be some crazy edge cases. But this is awesome. And I'm glad that they're sticking to this. They've talked about stuff like this for a long time. These are some of the things that we heard Chris mention during his 10 for the chairman like 9 years ago. And you were like, Chris, that's pretty sick. Nobody's talked about it for 6 years. And then they bring it back for this 1.0 talk. And you're like, okay, they're sticking to the plan. They're actually going through with what they said. And this is going to make all kinds of possibilities, not even just ship piracy, but like literally finding abandoned ships as a salvager and kind of, being a little sketch about it. Like, hey, we got to strip the tags on this. We can probably get some good money from this stuff. We're way out here in the middle of this random system. Like, do you really think somebody's going to come back to this? Let's tow this back and take out the power plant. That is so cool. Can't say that the Garden won't do that. Just depends on what star system we're in, eh?
Our criminal guild, you can get the dead man switch disabled and pay for a new title deed to become its new owner.
And then also, you can go and straight up acquire a new ship if you have the means of doing it. How fucking cool is that? Like, that is so cool. And obviously, you could always lose that ship. Might be harder to get it insured and stuff. But this is like, there's a secondhand market suddenly with this kind of stuff.
Also, if you're in a lawful system, you'll need to find a transient jump tunnel, as all major locations and POIs will have custom security that will scan you on arrival.
That makes sense.
Okay, so with that out of the way, let's look at the unlawful system in Pyro. Unlawful systems have no laws at all, and with that comes opportunity. Pyro, as an example, has an abundance of high-quality resources.
That's so different from the lore, what the lore used to be. And I'm okay with that. Like, I don't mind that they're going to change the lore based on how the game is functioning. This supposedly was a system where all of the stuff was strip mined and it lost its commercial value, so people left it because it wasn't worth dealing with all of the solar flares. Like, I'm fine if they have high quality resources here. That just makes the system make more sense in the grand scheme of things.
Hotbed of criminal activity, the literal definition of high risk, high reward. With crafting now requiring resources, you're going to want to create bases to mine and extract them. This is where base raiding will become a new form of PvP, and it's founded on a combined arms ethos. Defending players will be able to add defenses such as walls, automated turrets, and most importantly, ground shields, a localized version of the planetary shields used in lawful systems that absorb the most powerful of weaponry. No longer can you just turn up and drop a Moab.
Imagine if they didn't think of that and they were just like, yeah, you can have bases, but good luck.
One huge difference, though, compared to planetary shields, is that these shields can be disabled. You will have to strategically assess each base and punch your way through its defenses on foot to eventually bring down the shield generator. Once the shield is down, then you have options. You want to raise it to the ground, you can bomb it from the air. If you want to extract all the resources, though, you'll need to infiltrate the base using explosive charges and hacking while fighting off the defenders. Now, both piracy and base raiding is founded on sandbox gameplay. And again, that's the essence of Star Citizen. But we want to add more. Something where you can log on and immediately find the action and fight for a purpose. So first up, let's go on a history lesson.
Keep that in mind too.
In the early
how
2600s...
How often are people like, man, I get into this game and it takes me 20 minutes to get to any sort of gameplay? They know this. The game, this isn't even the first time they've talked about this. This game has always been meant to evolve into something where you can get in and get into gameplay quickly. This is just them reassuring people that you will be able to log on and off in a place where you can get to gameplay quickly. It's not always going to be this, start in a city, take a train, take your ship, get all your stuff in your ship, fly up to space, take a mission, go to that mission, and then get gameplay. This was always the plan. I'm glad that they're now laying it out, though, because, man, that is a constant complaint. And yeah, there's always Arena Commander, too.
There was a fledgling corporation called SEAL that had developed a new system-wide planetary shield technology, the same technology that will provide protection for your bases today. To prove this tech, they wanted to use Nyx and Pyro systems as a testbed. With the promise of high-quality resources, SEAL lured independent miners to man the shield network in exchange for shield protection for their settlements. As a prototype, SEAL couldn't provide total coverage over all the mining settlements, and so they created the SEAL Tokens program, allowing the most industrious factions to purchase shield coverage for their work. The network consisted of multiple linked bases on the ground that then linked to several stations in orbit around each planet that then connected to the nearest relay in the shield network, which eventually linked back to the shield core, which oversaw system-wide distribution of the shield technology. Factions could then earn SEAL tokens for working on any part of the network. They could then use these tokens to buy shield coverage. But with the competition amongst factions being so intense...
I like how there's a shield relay at Pyro 5, which is a gas giant. Good luck with your base.
SEAL was only able to offer shielding to the hardest workers. Unfortunately, due to outlaw interference, SEAL eventually pulled out of Pyro and Nyx and pushed for a more automated solution in more civilized systems. So fast forward to present day. Without SEAL's backing, they had to pull out and leave it as it is. And welcome to Station Warfare.
Okay. This is where things start to take a little bit of a shift in this presentation towards much more group-focused stuff. I do I think they did a good job of laying out the fact that there is a lot of missions to take as a solo player. And they probably could have gone into more detail about how that fits into the overall game itself, but I think that they did a pretty good job with that. Dynamic missions, mission givers, whole bunch of guilds, storyline, just a lot of stuff you can do as a solo. This stuff in terms of group gameplay, though, I do wonder how this factors into the pirate groups that they like, the factions that are already in these systems. Are those factions also maintaining why wouldn't they be taking part in this whole seal system? Is that just kind of something that they're going to be like, whatever. We're not including that in the lore. This is on the player side, and we're just not really paying attention to the headhunters and those people for this. Or will they be somehow involved in this? Will the piracy groups in the system raid your base as well as players? Is this just a player versus player kind of thing? That's I think that interests me. But I think they've got a lot more explaining to do with this. This feels like it's just an introduction to this kind of stuff. I think when it comes to Endgame, they really just basically were like, dynamic missions are the end game for solo players. And they could have said more, but I don't know how much more detail they could go into besides just it's this kind of mission and that kind of mission. Yeah, a lot of ISCs and SCLs about this kind of stuff for sure.
With the SEAL network still in place, but lacking resources, orgs can take ownership of these structures to gain access to planetary shield tech. Let's go! Which, as you know, would make their bases invulnerable. Unfortunately, there's a catch. There isn't enough to go around. And as in the good old SEAL days, the system still works via the SEAL token program. To earn tokens, you'll have to assault a location and then deposit resources to power the network. This begins with ground bases and ends at the shield core. Each structure occupied will then accrue SEAL tokens over time, with larger structures earning more, and at the end of each week, you must then use these tokens to purchase shield protection. With shield coverage being limited, though, the system automatically selects the orgs with the highest bid from across all shards. Meaning for that week only, a certain number of orgs will gain access to shield protection. So this is a chance for your org to become the de facto leader of a system. It means you'll be able to log on and immediately find the action and fight for your org. And finally, it's not just sandbox PvP or ganking. You are fighting for a purpose.
I do hope that this is something that is either not always in your face in lawless systems or not in every lawless system, so that you can still be in lawless systems that don't feel like they are constantly at the whims of org warfare. They just mentioned Pyro and Nyx for this, but like once we get to another system like Killian or something, does Killian even have planets? I would hope that there's still some variety between lawless systems in the sense that there's not just like everywhere you go or every system you go to, there is this looming in the background kind of org warfare going on that makes you a little bit more nervous to get into like the deep exploration gameplay that should also thrive in systems like this. But we'll see. We'll see what they have planned for this. They did just say Pyro and Nyx, so who knows?
So once you've won your bid, what then? Well, to talk more about that, I'd like to welcome Ian Leyland, Star Citizen's creative director, to the stage.
This also sounds like the kind of thing that they could really shift over time as they test it and see how it actually works with proper players and not just on paper.
All right, hello CitizenCon. Thank you, Rich. Thank you, Dave. So to continue the conversation of large-scale endgame org activities, let's go back to Pyro 3, where the ground bases were being built earlier today. This morning we saw the small habitat being built by Luke, And then we saw deck start to expand the base.
I think we'll touch on base building on Wednesday. I was really going back and forth between Squadron 42 and base building and crafting, but I really want to get to base building and crafting with you guys, so I think that's what we'll touch on then.
Into a commercial enterprise. But eventually, we saw a massive example of an org base. But with everything Rich was talking about, with org system-wide activities, we want to give you guys the ultimate end goal. But also the thing we need to protect. And to do that, let's look up into the sky and see what it is.
Boosting looks so good. I hope it looks like this in game. Get Stellaris vibes from this music, you know? Yeah, maybe a little Blade Runner too. It's good stuff. Good old analog synths. Oh no, this is totally solo player gameplay right here. Yeah, you don't need other people for this. Not at all. Yeah, I don't even know what they mean by gray box when it comes to this kind of thing.
Let me introduce you to player space stations.
Didn't think they were going to whip this out yet.
Finally, you can build your home.
When they teased player space stations last year, like we can go back to last year's base building presentation, and which honestly felt like it probably should have never even happened compared to this year's base building presentation. This year just felt like they took last year's and actually did the proper detail on it. Like, I'm pretty sure it was towards the end of this.
Engagement is always needed. So as Nick talked about, there's where power loss, combined different events, and then the big one. We start development Q1.
See, they probably should have teased this after they started development and knew what was going on.
So, that's me. Thank you all. Thank you for coming.
No, maybe he didn't say it there. He said it somewhere here about space stations.
Building. All right, it breaks down into the on-is. Is it to have a homes? Is it to gather resources available and move on to the next area? Or is it to be off-grid and be completely self-sufficient? Or rare NPCs.
Hold on.
With any blueprint, you can actually do research on it and then create different variations.
Learned the new trick.
With materials ranging from the common to ultra rare, you might find them at the local shop or have to travel around the universe to collect them. Unrefined, refined, simple materials, or even complex components will all go into the fabrication. With this, then you got location, location, location. First area is high security, so you must purchase the land. The base is actually invulnerable because of the planetary shield tech. A security will show up to protect it as well. You pay for the privilege. You're taxed. So at this point, space, not just can do it all. The Pioneer.
There we go.
Pioneer can do it all, and it still works as a mobile base. And we'll talk about some of the more expanded features that we're adding to it in later on. So,
At some time.
So, and then it's also, we're exploring what can be done in space, not just on the planet.
See, when they say that, I'm like, okay, well, that's like 2-3 years away. That sounds good. We can get to that once base building's in the game. Sounds good. But then they just come out here and they're like, hey, you know what? Player space stations. Let's just get right into it.
Amongst the stars.
Okay.
This will be the starting point for your base of operations, for system-wide org activities. But why is this an end goal? Well, first of all, to construct your own space station, it's going to require vast quantities of resources and materials.
Why are you asking Mrs. Tomato to shoot me? Come on now.
Large time investment.
We're in a good place. We're doing good things.
Start? Well, it all starts with the supply bay. And the supply bay can only be constructed by the Pioneer.
Yeah, I've watched this whole thing. We watched this yesterday together.
Once it's created, the supply bay then handles the creation of the station itself. Now, we're in gray box development phase, so the artwork's not final, but let's go on a journey and start building our space base.
Do I think this is possible at 2026? That's my problem with the gray box label here. I don't know what the they mean by gray box. I don't know what the progress is on this. Here's the thing. All of this that we're seeing at this point from base building, I mean, not even base building, but like the space station stuff, the Star Citizen 1.0 stuff is so dependent on where Squadron 42 is. Squadron 42 is still at least a year away, a year and a couple months away, right? And the funny thing is for me that we could see one more CitizenCon before Squadron 42. Technically, we could see 2 more CitizenCons before Squadron 42 releases. And the work that needs to be done on Squadron is so crucial for us knowing how far away stuff like this is. If Squadron is at a place where all of the side missions are done and the details of how things are interacted with are done, and they're just like trying to optimize and get it running, they could start moving a lot more people over to the PU and actually work a ton on this kind of stuff. Asset art, interactability, UI interfaces, all that kind of stuff. I could see this happening within 2 years. Yeah. But if Squadron 42 is in a worse situation than the prologue we saw, and there's still a bunch of integral work that needs to be done outside of just polishing and bug fixing and stuff, then it's like, okay, this could be a pretty long way away. So I don't really know. Again, these videos, they say gray box. This is not gray box. This is farther ahead than gray box. This is done up a little bit to look nicer. There's lighting, there's texturing, there's all kinds of like cinematography going on here that makes it feel better than it is. So I don't view this in gray box in the same way that I viewed the Zeus MK2 in gray box back in March. And I think what it'll come down to is like how much we start to see this talked about on monthly reports. If we don't see anything about space stations on monthly reports within the first couple of months of next year, then I'm going to assume this is still pretty far away. If we suddenly start seeing talk about this stuff on the monthly reports, as in they were just keeping it off monthly reports recently because they didn't want us to know they were working on this, but they were working on this already, then it's like, okay, I could see where this is going. And if it is truly in gray box, then that's probably the case. But it's going to be hard to make a call on that for at least the next month or two. I think, as with everything Star Citizen related, don't look at the roadmaps, don't look at the marketing videos, look at the monthly reports. Look at what's actually showing up in ISC, which is some marketing, but it's more accurate lately than it has been. And look at the way they're talking about it specifically in terms of the details during Star Citizen Live and stuff like that. Mrs. Tomato, somebody said to shoot me. Maverick, thank you for the bit, by the way. Okay. All right, get it over with. What do you mean that doesn't count? Congratulations, MGL. Some Ow! God. In the neck? I know. Love the exterior freight elevators. And I guess this isn't even a freight elevator. That's kind of like a resource pad. And so this is like the constructor, the fabricator for the space station, and it just sucks up the resources magically from the boxes, which I don't care. So be it. Just disappear the boxes. By this point, f it all. It's beautiful on its own. This is like one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in any video game or video game marketing material, so I'm just going to rewind it and give you guys the full view of this. Thank you, Pedro. They should have had Pedro come out on stage at this point and be like, yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So as you saw, the cargo grid of the supply bay consumes resources. And the required resources will be substantial and will need to be topped up over time. So this means orgs will be encouraged to have efficient logistic networks to feed the supply bay. And as Rich outlined with professions, it's ideal if your org is well-rounded in terms of roles.
Yes, Pedro Pascal.
Even the
Bring Pedro Pascal out.
Can contribute. The supply bay has automated construction drones, which are used to create the station. And unlike ground bases, many drones are used at once to create the base. Once the station is built, the supply bay then integrates into the station itself. So here we are. We've built our core station module, and it's big. And out of the box, the station comes readily built with some core functionality. Let me talk you through it. Right on the top is the bridge, which is the command deck. This is where all further construction is going to be managed. From here, we can then monitor the status of the entire station. We have access to power and water management. Power and cooling is something you'll need to consider carefully. It also is an area to set permissions for who can enter particular areas, either divided by the ranks of the org itself or open to the public.
Dude, this is going to be so much logistical work. Oh my God.
And there'll be a radar station to track the activity outside the base. And the terminals to access logs of who has visited the station and see what they did. So let's jump back in game and take a stroll through our bridge.
It's actually interesting that the space stations themselves start out this big, because you would think, like, this feels like it's automatically kind of geared towards the largest orgs. Like, if your org has 100 people, would you need something like this if you have a bunch of ground bases? It feels like if you were 100 people, then you'd only have a space station. But ground bases seem like a given because you need to be able to have a ground base to really get a lot of resources unless you're buying those resources from somewhere else. So like you kind of want to have more and more people to be able to have a space station like this, but a lot of orgs are probably going to remain fairly mid-sized. I hope that this is a station that can be maintained by just, you know, a couple dozen people maybe. Or, you know, maybe this is something where you can be like, you don't have to be part of the org to be based here. You can have public space stations that are just governed by the org, but act as a place where a lot of different players can make their home. You hope they offer something for smaller orgs to enjoy. The bases are certainly that. But yeah, the larger... The space stations I would be interested in, they probably don't even know what the minimum kind of plan would be for somebody to maintain this, but like, I guess it would mainly just be engineering and defense that you would need to keep something like this running well. Yeah, he said that the station can be made public. So I guess there's always that. Oh, I'm not even talking about solo people. I'm talking like how many people in chat are in an org with like 5 to 10 other people. You kind of want to have a space station. That'd be awesome. Or at least a part of a space station. But yeah, he did mention public. So there's probably a good chance that you could have multiple orgs, allianced orgs, groups of people who are maybe not even affiliated with any orgs that could still make their home on that place, which would be very cool. That would be very sick if you could separate it by hardpoint too, yeah. Asteroid bases. Shout out to my asteroid base folks. 4 or 5 people just chilling in some asteroid belt somewhere. Offering some small time refueling services. He's got a gun! This is so unrealistic. Nobody's sprinting around. Yeah, I wonder if space stations could be a thing in high security systems. Could you have a competing space station with a cargo-focused depot in orbit around Hurston?
Super awesome. The back of the bridge leads to a centralized transit network. This spine physically connects the entire station and will provide access to the various decks.
I didn't go to CitizenCon this year.
Each level in the station will have a centralized lobby area, and this is your station. You'll be able to use the decorator mode, so you'll have plenty of space to theme it however you want. And speaking of having plenty of space, this space station will have a one-to-one interior layout matching the exterior. No magic elevators.
Just unmagic elevators.
So you can circumnavigate around the entire perimeter, and it's wonderful. Okay, let's jump back in.
Yeah, they keep talking about this theming, but they don't get into detail about it. That's a lot of this stuff with the base building, with the space station building. I'm not bashing them for it. These are the kind of more integral details you got to get to once it's actually coming into the game. But I'd be interested in knowing just how far the theming goes and how they're going to handle it. There's so much opportunity for monetization with player-controlled space stations, with bases, all that kind of stuff, and I'm here for it. If they can use cosmetic and theming stuff for these kinds of spaces and depend less on ship sales, then that sounds more healthy for the game. There we go. There's the running man with the box. No ships crashing into the, dude, that cart would have been running people over. This ship would have been crashing into the station. Like, these people are far too proper.
All right.
I do think that the Galaxy will still be able to build.
As you can see, right at the bottom of the central transit system leads to the lower areas. This is where you'll gain access to the engineering deck. So like bigger ships, this is where all the hands-on engineering and maintenance gameplay happens. This will serve as the beating heart of your station. Then we have the hangar deck. And as the name implies, this is where you'll gain access to your hangar network. The base station comes with a large hangar already built, along with 2 docking collars, and also empty slots for another 2 medium hangars when needed. There will be a vast network of internal road systems, meaning you can quickly drive from one hangar to the other. No
Roads.
elevators needed.
Yay!
Okay, let's check back in.
Look at all these freaking atlases. These people just got crazy about their LTI tokens. Where's this one even going? Where are you going, dude? I don't think they even talked about LTI. I assume there still is LTI.
All right, so your station hangar will offer some enhanced logistics. For example, there'll be spaces for several freight elevators. And there'll be empty modules for open ship parking for vehicles and ships.
Chris Wave.
And there'll be also exit points where you can simply drive out into your station. Then there'll be also an upper level for the observation deck. From the observation deck, you'll have a control room. And from here, you'll have master control over the freight elevators and the vehicle elevators. This means that even before someone has landed, their new cargo can be up into the hangar and ready to be loaded up.
So it sounds like these hangars wouldn't be instanced then? Maybe?
Now, everything we've spoken about so far is what comes with your station. Let's talk about what you can do to expand it. As I mentioned before, the station comes with a predetermined interior network of corridors and roads. And in this network, you'll find an array of bulkhead connectors. Bulkhead connectors will come in tiers 1 to 3, which drives the size of room you're able to build. In the interior build mode, this is where you start to expand.
Quick question that I just thought of for chat. This is in no way indicative of what I think they are actually doing, but I'd be interested if they had to do, if doing these space stations meant giving up the overall goal that they had for building interiors originally, would you be for it or against it? Yes or no? Would you prefer this stuff, or would you prefer building interiors across the game? Because I was just thinking to myself, maybe that's the kind of thing they did. Maybe they were like, hey, let's just do sewers, and we could focus more on space-based installations and stuff and base building. Like, we have finite resources. We could put it towards the stuff that is able to be expanded more around, not against. You be for it, against it, for it, no, yes, yes, yes. Highly against it. Apartments for the solo players. But what if you could get an apartment in a space station as a solo player? You'd want this stuff instead? You would want interiors? Okay, so chat's pretty split on that. Some of you really want the building interiors instead. Some of you would prefer this kind of stuff. I'm not saying that that's the way that they had to do it. This is a hypothetical, and I'm just wondering what people want more of. Do they want to see more of this player-made kind of stuff in space, or do they want to see more of buildings wholly fleshed out in cities?
The rooms will require resource and time to construct, and once built, you can rename each room, which will be reflected in the station's minimap. The interior of your station will have ample areas for you to expand. You can build generic empty rooms, and you can fill with items to your heart's content.
Welcome to the org. And you can be in multiple orgs, yes.
You can also build specialist rooms, where the theme and functionality is already set for you, such as mess halls or infirmaries, or generator rooms.
Oh, we'll be affiliated with multiple guilds.
There are shops. So similar to the small shops we built around the ground base, this is on a much bigger scale. But that's just the interior. Let's talk about the exterior.
See, dude, this is so dependent on how many devs they could have on this, because I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, we're all thinking about base building. That already feels like it's going to be incredibly difficult to do. And we could go back to the part where they're showing this stuff. Like, who knows how close this stuff is to actually being done? Obviously, they've got a real interface that's outside of Rastar at this point, and it feels like they've got good direction going with base building. But this already feels like just a hefty responsibility to take on with how this game's going to run.
This one is a large solid extractor. We'll also have liquid and gas, depending on which type of deposit that you've settled on. We have our output grid here, where we're getting all the brand new resources up out the ground.
This is wild to me. I honestly didn't think it was going to get this in depth with base building, like with how big these bases are that they're showing us.
In-game and apply them
This
to
is
buildings.
crazy. But then, you go in here and you're like, okay, we're going to expand space stations and give you modular buildable space stations with exterior space to expand into. It's nuts.
To bridge operations of power management. A situation may arise where power priority is needed. Then we have major hardpoints. The core station module comes with 2 hardpoint connectors. Major hardpoints
What are some things I expected but didn't see?
Substantial wing additions to your station. The first example
I think more advanced forms of the gameplay we already do. I was kind of hoping we'd see some of that. Like, what kind of mining is the Orion going to do more realistically now that we're at this point? And yeah, Death of a Spaceman stuff I thought would be talked about a little more. You can indeed connect space stations together.
Awesome. The first example is the cargo wing. The cargo wing will dramatically increase your inventory capacity.
Yeah, scanning.
So this is ideal for orgs who are specializing in hauling. Then we have the refinery wing.
So like GII would definitely have this kind of stuff in our space station. But this is all to power our main goals,
Refine resources
which is
on a
medicine.
vast scale. As it's in space, it's much more convenient than traveling to a ground base. Now, a player could buy resources from your cargo wing and then refine it directly in the refinery wing. And finally, we have the hangar wing. So, all right.
You just said, all right.
So, the bigger your fleet, the more hangars you'll want. There'll be a variety of hangar sizes as well as docking collars to help organize your fleet's deployment.
GIA will have space stations, yes.
All major hardpoint wings are connected via struts. And like the rest of the station, the struts are also internally traversable. Okay, so let's recap on the exterior expansion wings. Minor hardpoints give us options on how to collect resources or provide automated defenses for your base. Major hardpoints gives us options on how you can specialize your base. Let's jump back in game and see how our base is getting on.
I think there will be a lot of stuff for new players who don't want to do this kind of stuff as well. Good music.
All right. Yes, Pedro has been working with us on this as well, so thank you. Looking cool. Customization.
Like, dude, get rid of the visuals. Just keep playing the music, man.
Is just as important as expansion. Similar to ground bases, you'll be able to earn tints for your station, and you'll be able to apply decals for your org logos.
Oh, God. What is going to happen with that?
Outside of minor and major hardpoints, your station will come with 2 unique base expansion points. One on the top side behind the bridge, and one on the underside.
Dude, if they sell this stuff for money, that's so much better than ships. I will say that every single time. Rather than be getting their money from selling to the groups of massive amounts of people who want to have a space station and do this stuff with it, than selling a bunch of ships all the time and continuing that on. I don't know what to say.
The top side will be for the crow's nest. Now, all the other modules built so far have very specific functionality, but I'll admit, this is for the org members out there who want the ultimate in personal space.
Yeah, I think they'll still sell ships too. No, it doesn't really work with this one, does it? Sell cosmetics, man. dude spent all his money on this room and now has nothing to put in it. A shame. He's like, huh, this is awkward. Meanwhile, that guy's got a spaceship. What do you have?
All right. So I'm going to be flying around the verse, and I want personal invitations to see what you've done in those rooms, okay? Super cool. I can't wait to see what you do with it. Now let's talk about the underside. This is going to be for the flight deck, which also comes with an additional 3 major hardpoints. The flight deck is perfect for your rapid reaction forces. It's ideal for fighters, but big enough to fit most ships. It's the perfect home for your station's defensive air wing. And just like the hangars, there'll be an observation deck which can override freight elevators, making rearming quicker and easier during operations. So an org with a tight flight deck crew can be substantially more efficient than others. Now, this one's my favorite.
Thank you, Escaper.
Let's take a look.
Thanks for the super chat, mate. Just finding Mrs. Tomato's hair in my beard. I'm like, why the heck is there such a long hair on my beard? And it's not mine. It's Mrs. Tomato's.
There's a few little Easter eggs in that video. But why do you need a flight deck for your rapid defenses force?
Hey, thanks for the super chat, Billa.
Well,
you think rare commodities and specialized fabrications will bring solo players to orgs, at least to procure those needs? I think a lot of people are missing that kind of thing. That, like, hey, don't laugh at my beard. It's more, there's going to be more player interactivity here that doesn't require you to be part of a group or part of a org. And you can still take part in the gameplay that's created by those orgs and groups. Like, that's why I wanted to hear a little bit more about the economy, because is an org base going to factor into the economy the exact same way that an outpost that they placed on a planet would? That's what I hear is what happened with Star Wars Galaxies. You could be a solo player who flies into an org's base just to drop off some cargo because that org buys the specific cargo that you're carrying for much higher than the base that's 50 kilometers away. You could be the you could be the solo player who knows a specific org that sells stuff for really cheap if you give them a certain mineral, and so you fly into their base and you get that stuff. You never have to talk to them. You never have to work with them. You never have to sign up for their group. You're still a solo player, still doing solo play. You're just benefiting off of the fact that there are orgs that exist. And I think that's something people are missing when they talk about wanting solo play, is like, orgs can create solo play too. Hell, orgs can create missions, supposedly. And maybe those missions can also be public. Maybe an org can say, hey, we're building a base. We need every miner in the system to consider mining gold and bringing it here. Suddenly, as a solo player, you never have to be part of the org, but you still get that kind of contract from them. And I think that's kind of what they're talking about when they were in the base building segment. I think they kind of mentioned something about how you could be an org base that offers or like buys certain things. Don't remember where it was specifically. But it seems likely. I know, interacting with other players. Insanity. I don't know. We'll go over that on Wednesday. We're going to go over this whole base building part, so we'll probably come across that mention anyways, but yeah, here we go. This was it.
Which tends to have the higher quality material. Maybe you end up cornering the markets for a particular item or resource, and your shop will then turn into a hotspot of activity, making you loads of credits. Some of you will become infamous because of it. But bear in mind, a successful shop also depends on location. Do you want your customers on edge in Pyro, which tends to have the higher quality materials? Or do you want to spend time hauling them all the way over to safer systems where your customers can be more at peace? We talked about selling.
No, I'm past it there.
The base, why it's so impactful for crafting and base building the game as a whole. Understandably, throughout this presentation, we've been telling you why you want to craft all these things or why you want to build this big base. But maybe you don't have the time to build a big base and maintain it. Maybe you want to spend your time doing the missions.
See you later, Luna Maria.
That's how you want to make your credits instead. Shops mean that you can benefit from the players who do want to spend the time making those bases or crafting those specialist items, and then you can purchase them from them.
Yeah,
which is very important because crafted items using high quality materials will be the most powerful in the game.
So they kind of touch on that there. I think that's important for them to make clear.
Very own home amongst the stars. But wait. But wait. There's one more unique module we can build, and that is the dry dock. This unique slot will be at the back of the station. It has its very own dedicated observation room with crafting stations, and has a transit tram which runs along the inside of the arms, leading to the docking collars where your ship will be constructed. So, the only question still remains, what sizes of ship can we build? Let's take a look.
So this is a little bit of a change. Originally, bangles were going to be something that you could just find and then kind of procure, and it would always persist and you'd need to take control of it and maintain it. But now they're saying you can build one, which is interesting. That's a hefty...
I'll just watch the end of the show.
That's a lot. And how long would it take, too?
I want to see the reaction.
At this point, I honestly felt like this was just like, we're gonna just, you could do everything, all of the things. I'm like, okay, all right. Next CitizenCon, they're going to be like, we're going to let you craft a retribution. That's also true. The rep that you would need to be able to craft a bangle. It's like making an aircraft carrier as a civilian organization. Somebody is losing it over there.
Thanks, Ian. So now we're talking. Multiple stations linking and dry docks to craft your very own capital ships. The ultimate end goal for any org. Okay, so let's take a step back. At the beginning of this presentation, I mentioned we had 3 types of players and 1 universe. And hopefully you can see we have purposeful gameplay catering to each type of player. But that wasn't the only goal. It was to build a game that connected all 3 together cohesively. And this is where you come in. The community, the lifeblood of Star Citizen. Whether you're a PVE player delving for unique crafting blueprints, a non-combat player mining for high-quality resources or building a base with your friends, or a PvP player fighting for your org in station warfare to protect your base, each one of you supports each other. You need the blueprints to craft, you need the resources to make them, and you need the equipment and protection to be safe. This is what Star Citizen is. It's a universe that caters to all players. Now, I could probably go on for another 10 hours deep diving into each system.
I'd like that. I don't think anybody would disagree with that, buddy.
But I do Jared out of a job, and he needs future ISCs and SC Lives and CitizenCons. Today was to reaffirm what type of game we are making. And I hope you continue to come with us on this journey as we march towards Star Citizen 1.0.
They didn't talk about NPC
CitizenCon,
Cruise.
and can we welcome Chris Roberts? No?
Chimera, thank you for the super chat. That's the end of the Star Citizen 1.0 talk. They didn't mention NPC Cruise or AI Blades, which I think was very telling. I don't know if that means, like, I guess it's safest to assume that means that they're not doing that for 1.0, but that's really dangerous. Because it is very clear that large ships will not be flyable efficiently by solo players. You will be able to fly them, but you're not going to be able to do all the things on them. And it sounds like they're not planning on having AI be able to take those responsibilities for you. If you're flying a galaxy, you would have to stop flying that galaxy to then go and do the refining, and stop doing the refining to go and repair the components, and stop repairing the components to go and man the turret if you get attacked. Like, just there's a lot missing there if there's no NPC crew or AI blades. A lot of what they said here is really good, and like I said, I think basically everything up until here is basically everything up until right here is incredibly crucial for players to know. You could even go so far as to say before this stuff too. You could go to like the ship piracy. Everything up until like right here is so crucial for everybody to know. And it's such important stuff. And I'm glad they went over it. It was a lot of law and security talk. It was mission talk. It was to some extent economy. It was game loops. It was guilds. It was just a lot of really good information that helps to have some level of expectations, of being able to hold them accountable to a certain direction they're going in, of being able to look at the decisions that they're making and the features that they're putting in, and actually draw some conclusions on how that fits into their view of this game. Most of all, though, this is something that we can now summarize to give to new players to help them understand this is the type of game you're getting into. This part here, a lot of people might hinge on joining the game based on this. Same with where is it? This part. The idea of playing this game might completely change for some people depending on this single slide, and being able to have it officially talked about all in one place is super important. But they still didn't get into a ton of detail about things like death, respawns, how is bed logging changing, NPC crews and AI, which I guess aren't going to be in 1.0, but we know that Death of a Spaceman is, and they didn't really get super into depth there, which tells me that a lot of this stuff is still fairly high level. It might not be high level for a long time. This might be stuff that they have a good idea of, but they didn't want to go into detail to make this super long. But it makes it still didn't go into a ton of detail here. I don't mean hold accountable as in like we're gonna grab them by the neck and be like, you said this, do this. I mean, when we ask questions in Star Citizen Live, when we post things in Spectrum, we have something that we can reference. That means they need to answer it in some form of consistency with what they've said here in this. That's all I mean by that. We should have a lot more talks about this stuff in detail over the next 6 months and probably the next year when it comes to ISCs and Star Citizen Lives. We'll just have to see, though. The thing that's in question now is what's the pace? What is the pace of creating all of this? Is this 5 years? Is this 3 years? Is this 2 years? Is this 1 year for some of it and 5 years for others? Is this stuff that you're going to do over time with the missions, or are you going to hold off with a lot of it and do it all at once? How is the reputation going to change in the short term versus the long term? How are the guilds going to be added? Are we going to start to see these guilds popping up? Is the Interstellar Transport Guild going to expand in its reputation and missions, or is it going to wait for everything else to catch up? There's a lot of questions there, and I don't think we'll have a good idea until mid next year at the earliest. So thank you everybody for joining me for this deep dive into Star Citizen 1.0 and what they've had to say about it. There's going to be plenty more for us to learn over time. And I hope this at least gave you some idea of where things are headed.